A 5-year-old boy knelt on the scorching nursery floor, his hands raw and bleeding from scrubbing them relentlessly in ice-cold water, desperately trying to save his fading baby sister. Fear gripped him silent, a cruel brainwash convincing him his own father, a police officer, would unleash pain if he uttered a single sound. Outside the locked door, a man stood quietly, unaware that the woman he cherished was silently counting down the minutes to her daughter's fading brain life. No one understood the truth except the German shepherd by his side, who sensed the silent agony echoing from a child's soul. What this father discovered when he turned that key will shatter your heart, and then rebuild it with the unyielding force of justice. Before we reveal the truth, share where you're watching from today. Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe that God sends guardian angels disguised as loyal dogs and courageous children, subscribe now, because this one will remind you that darkness stands no chance when love refuses to look away. The tires of the black pickup whispered softly against the asphalt as Zane steered onto a well-known suburban street. It was one of those flawless Denver afternoons that made you forget winter's harshness. The sun dominated a crystal blue sky, bathing the air in a comforting warmth of 68 degrees. A gentle breeze swept down from the distant Rockies, carrying pine scents and the sweet smell of thawing earth, stirring the fresh leaves of the oaks lining the sidewalk. It was weather that usually invited barbecues and children laughing under sprinklers. Zane shrugged, trying to loosen the tension that had built over the past 2 weeks. He was a towering man, broad-shouldered and sturdy hands roughened by years of leashes and guns. His dark hair was clipped short in a military cut, though a hint of stubble softened the sharp jawline beneath. At 35, he was a sergeant in the K-9 unit, and he had just wrapped up a grueling narcotics case that had him sleeping more often in his truck than a bed. Checking the rearview mirror, he whispered, "We're home, buddy." His voice gravelly with tiredness, yet warm with love. In the back seat, Rollo stirred a majestic German shepherd 4 years of age, with a deep black and rich tan coat gleaming like polished mahogany. His eyes sparkled with intelligence and a playful light when off duty. Rollo was no ordinary dog. He was Zane's partner, his shadow, the sole being on earth in whom Zane placed his absolute trust. A faint smile crept across Zane's face. He hadn't told Mara he'd be home early. He planned to surprise them. He imagined Mara's face pretending annoyance at his silence, but hiding that secret smile she reserved just for him. He pictured Jace, his 5-year-old son, dashing to greet him, tackling his legs, and baby Lily, just learning to pull herself up on the furniture. The thought of embracing his children was the only thing keeping his eyes open. The truck eased into the driveway of their 2-story colonial home, looking picture-perfect. The lawn trimmed to perfection, curtains drawn to shield from the afternoon sun, and the neighborhood's quietude radiating peace. But as Zane turned the wheel to pull in, a sudden shift shattered the calm inside the cab. It wasn't a bark that came. It was an invisible change in the air, a sudden electric charge pulsing from the back seat. Rollo, who had moments ago been panting with joy, suddenly froze in sharp stillness. The dog's ears swiveled forward, folding back slightly against his skull. He did not whimper or pace. Instead, he lowered his head, his heavy frame settling into a stalking position right there on the leather seat. From deep within his chest rose a low, guttural rumble, a sound so faint it was felt more than heard. Zane slammed on the brakes before the truck fully rolled into the driveway. He glanced back. "Rollo," Zane whispered, his instincts snapping instantly from protective father to alert officer. "What is it?" The dog's eyes were fixed on the house. More precisely, a second-floor window left cracked open just an inch. Rollo's nostrils flared wide, inhaling sharp, rapid breaths of air. The fur along his spine rose into a jagged line of warning hackles. Zane recognized that look, that stance. He'd seen it before, outside hidden dens and intense hostage standoffs. This wasn't a response to a squirrel or a delivery person. No, this was triggered by something far more primal, Rollo was detecting pheromones, specifically the sharp metallic tang of cortisol and adrenaline, the unmistakable scent of raw, unfiltered terror. Zane felt his blood run ice cold, draining the warm spring day of comfort. The once peaceful suburban quiet now pressed down like a suffocating shroud over the house. Jace Lily Zane's eyes swept the home's exterior. Everything seemed untouched. No shattered windows, no unfamiliar cars. But Rollo never deceived. If Rollo sensed fear inside, then fear existed within those walls. Zane made a split-second call he chose not to pull into the driveway. He didn't want the engines shut down to give any hint inside. Instead, he eased the truck back onto the street and rolled it down the block about 30 yards, parking discreetly behind a neighbor's hedge. He killed the engine. The silence inside the cab was thunderous. "Easy, Zane," murmured. His hand drifted to his waistband. Though off-duty, he was never without his service weapon, his Glock 19 feeling like an extension of his arm. He checked the chamber. Loaded. He opened the truck's back door. Rollo leapt out not with his usual high-spirited energy, but with a haunting, silent grace. The dog's motions were fluid muscles coiled like tempered steel springs. He glanced up at Zane, those amber eyes darkened with focus and readiness, waiting for orders. Zane remained silent. He gave a hand signal, a crisp chop, followed by a finger pressed to his lips. Silent approach. Heel. Rollo pressed in beside Zane's left leg, moving seamlessly as one with his master. They avoided the sidewalk. Instead, they slipped through the neighbor's side yard using the hedges as cover, looping back toward Zane's backyard. The grass felt soft beneath Zane's boots. The wind shifted, blowing from the house toward them. Rollo halted in mid-step, nose rising once more. A faint whimper broke softly from his throat, quickly stifled. The dog trembled not from fear for himself, but from absorbing the overwhelming distress signals saturating the air. Zane's heart pounded fiercely against his chest, a frantic drumbeat he'd forced himself to silence. He needed ice in his veins, not fire. Arriving at the back gate, it hung unlatched. Zane frowned. He always made sure it was secured. He pushed it open cautiously, wincing as a hinge gave a soft, protesting squeak, but the sound was swallowed by the whispering oak leaves. They stood now in the backyard. The swing set swayed gently, empty as a plastic truck lay overturned in the grass. A snapshot of family tranquility abruptly shattered. Zane edged closer to the back door, a sliding glass portal leading into the kitchen's heart. Mara was vigilant about security, always wedging the dowel rod in the track to bar any forceful entry. Zane pressed his eye to the glass. The kitchen was deserted. A half-finished cup of coffee lingered on the counter. He grasped the handle. It glided open smooth and silent. The dowel rod was missing. The lock left undone. A wave of nausea rolled over Zane. Mara never left this door unsecured, her paranoia about safety reins when he's away. An open door meant one of two things: careless lapse in chaos, or someone else had already crossed the threshold. "Stay," Zane whispered faintly, steadying his breath. He crossed the threshold, weapon drawn but hugged tight to his chest, eyes sweeping the room. Rollo moved behind him like a shadow, claws silent against the tile. The house held a silence, but not the comforting hush of rest. It was thick, suffocating silence. The silence that holds a breath in its chest. Zane moved through the kitchen, eyes darting to every corner. The air here felt strange, unlike the fresh breeze outside. It was stagnant, heavy, oppressive in its warmth. Why such heat? The thermostat was preset to a steady 70 degrees, yet the room's air hung dry and dense. He reached the hallway leading to the living room and stairs. Rollo took point, body low and tense. The dog's posture shifted. Ears tipped upward, attuned to the hidden sounds lurking behind bedroom doors. Zane glanced at the carpeted stairs, soft underfoot, masking their ascent. But the wooden floorboards above were infamous for their creak. Every step needed to be flawless. His eyes caught the family portraits lining the staircase walls, a snapshot of him and Mara on their wedding day. Another of Jace's first birthday face smothered in cake. Those moments felt like relics from a distant past. The house now seemed foreign hostile. Rollo's paw rested on the first step. The dog turned to Zane with wide, urgent eyes full of silent plea. Rollo sniffed out a scent Zane couldn't detect. It was the unmistakable trace of a child's terror. Zane gave a resolute nod, go. They climbed 2 hunters on their own ground, chasing the source of the fear seeping through these floorboards. The Denver sun spilled through the foyer window, throwing long, warped shadows across the wall, but it offered no comfort. The pit in Zane's stomach clenched tighter with each step. He wished he was wrong, a cop haunted by too many years on the job. But when they reached the landing's summit, Rollo halted abruptly in front of the nursery door, and Zane's chest sank with sick certainty the nightmare wasn't roaming outside anymore. It was here. The silence inside wasn't hollow. It was dense, a tangible weight pressing against Zane's senses, silence that typically follows a scream, though none had yet pierced the stillness. As Zane edged deeper into the foyer, his boots barely grazing the hardwood floor before settling with practiced quiet, his gaze swept across the living room to his left. It was impeccable, almost too immaculate. In a home with a 5-year-old boy and a crawling infant of 8 months, there should have been signs of life everywhere. A rogue Lego brick, ready to maim an unsuspecting adult, a tossed-aside blanket, a sippy cup left casually on a coaster, or the colorful, chaotic mess that so unmistakably defines fatherhood. Yet there was nothing. The cushions on the beige sofa were fluffed to flawless perfection. The magazines on the coffee table were arranged with mathematical precision. The carpet was vacuumed so thoroughly that the lines remained sharp, untouched. It resembled a staged model home, a museum, a place where children were strictly forbidden. A cold, unsettling knot twisted deep in Zane's stomach, unlike the sharp rush of adrenaline from the tactical entry. This was the icy grip of realization. He had always admired Mara's knack for keeping the house order, crediting her organizational prowess. Now, under the weight of Rollo's anxiety, it no longer felt orderly. It felt sterile, like a carefully crafted stage set where every prop had been reset, erasing the very souls meant to fill the space. Rollo nudged Zane's calf with his damp nose, a silent urge. Move. The dog avoided the living room entirely, moving low and stealthily, like a wolf stalking through dense underbrush. He headed straight for the staircase. Zane followed, shifting cautiously. He knew this house well. He was aware of every creaking floorboard. He kept to the edges of the hallway, stepping close to the baseboards where the subfloor offered the strongest support. The staircase was carpeted in plush gray wool, muffling every sound. Still, the wood beneath was old. One wrong step, one creak, and their advantage would vanish. Step by deliberate step they climbed. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight streaming through the high transom window above the front door, indifferent to the mounting tension coiling tighter with every footfall. Zane's breath was shallow but steady. His hand hovered near his chest, no longer gripping his weapon but poised to strike or defend. As they reached the landing, the temperature shifted noticeably. Downstairs it had been 70 degrees, perhaps a touch warmer in the stale air. Up here, in the narrow hallway leading to the bedrooms, the heat was unmistakably hotter. It wasn't coming from the vents. It was emanating from one focused source. Rollo wasted no time. He bypassed the master bedroom, ignored the guest bathroom. Instead, he headed straight for the door at the end of the hall, the nursery. The door was painted a soft, creamy white, the very shade they had chosen together when Mara was pregnant with Lily. Innocent, safe, yet Rollo stopped 3 feet from the threshold. He lowered his head, pushing his nose into the narrow gap beneath the door. A high-pitched whine built in his throat, but Zane gently placed a firm hand on the dog's neck. The pressure was a command, silence. I see it. Zane stepped forward, reaching slowly and carefully for the lever handle, intending to ease it open just enough to peek inside without a sound. But the handle didn't budge. It was locked. Zane froze, a flash of pure, white-hot anger sparking behind his eyes, sharp and blazing. This was a breach of the first unbreakable rule they had agreed on when they moved in no locked doors in the children's rooms. To Zane, fire safety was sacred, an unwavering creed. In a blaze, every second was precious. A locked door was nothing less than a death sentence. Mara understood this perfectly. She had nodded in agreement when he replaced the locks with non-locking handles on Jace's old bedroom door. So why was there a lock on the nursery door now? And more worrying, why was it locked in the middle of the afternoon? He leaned in closer, pressing his ear against the cold white wood. That's when he caught it. A low, constant drone, an insistent, mechanical hum, steady and relentless. It took Zane a moment to place the sound, and when it clicked, the absurdity hit him like a punch. It was an electric space heater, that old ceramic model they stored in the garage for brutal winter months, when the central heating struggled against freezing blizzards. But outside it was nearly 70 degrees, the sun shining with fierce intensity. Why was a space heater cranked up inside a sealed, locked room? The heater's drone was deafening, working like a wall of white noise. That explained why the truck's roar, the back door, the creak of the gate, all went unnoticed. It was a sonic shield, but not perfect. Beneath that mechanical hum, a human voice sliced through low, hissing with venom. "Quit whining," it snapped. Zane's blood froze, turning to icy dread. It was Mara, but not the Mara who welcomed him home with gentle kisses and warm words about his day. Not the woman who shared pictures of their darling babies online. This voice was like the sound of glass scraping furiously. "I said stop it." Mara spoke again, muffled behind the locked door, yet clear enough to catch every chilling word. "You want me to stuff a rag in her mouth? Tell me you want that. Because I'll do it, Jace. I'll silence her if you won't." Zane's fist clenched violently against the doorframe, his knuckles pale, his breath frozen in his throat. "Jace?" She was speaking to his son. "Please!" came a tiny trembling voice so faint Zane almost missed it. "She's hot, Mommy. She's burning. She's fine." Mara's tone shifted sharply from irritation to a bone-chilling, calculating coldness. "She just needs to sweat it out. That's how the sickness leaves. Now keep that cloth on her head, and don't you dare move. Don't mess up the plan, you little brat. We're almost there." Plan. The word hung heavy, ominous, and cruel. Parents don't hatch plans for their sick children. They live on worry doctor's appointments, panic. They never lock doors and crank up space heaters in the springtime. At his leg, Rollo was trembling, the dog's restraint fraying under the weight of imminent danger. Zane could smell distress pheromones flooding beneath the door like waves. He closed his eyes just for a heartbeat, his mind fracturing as his wife's image shattered into shards. The pristine house, the locked door, the deafening silence all betrayed the truth. This wasn't a home, it was a prison. And the woman inside was no mother. She was a monster waiting for him to leave. Eyes snapping open, the man understood the father was gone. The husband was gone. Only the sergeant remained. His hand reached for the keys at his belt. Zane's fingers moved over his belt, brushing past the leather holster, before resting on his small, silent keyring clipped to the belt loop, a habit from his patrol days. Keys without jingling keys that never gave away his position. With a skilled flick of his thumb, he slipped the ring free, the cool metal grounding him against his clammy palm. He picked out the small brass key that unlocked the privacy latches inside locks he had installed himself, never once imagining he'd have to use them to reach his own children. Beside him, Rollo stood frozen like a statue, hewn from black obsidian, the dog trembling with the strain of holding back. His ears were pinned tightly flat, and a low, menacing vibration rumbled deep in his chest, a growl clenched behind locked teeth. Rollo was desperate to break through. He wanted to shred the wood apart and silence the danger he could scent so clearly. Zane dropped to one knee, leveling his gaze with the dog's. He raised a firm palm. "Wait," he mouthed, not a plea, but the unwavering order of the alpha. Rollo's amber eyes flicked to the door, then returned to Zane, and he settled onto his haunches. He would not budge until the release word came, not even if the house itself was ablaze around them. Zane turned his attention back to the door. The hum of the space heater inside was both a blessing and a curse. The mechanical drone was loud, causing the doorframe to vibrate just enough. It helped mask the subtle clicks of the lock tumblers, but it meant the heat was rising by the second. He slid the key in, not with force, but with careful grace, feeling the pins lift inside the lock. He applied barely there tension on the handle. Slowly he turned the key. Click. The sharp sound pierced Zane's ears, but the heater's drone swallowed it completely. The lock sprung open. Zane held his breath, steadying himself, heart pounding. He eased the handle millimeter by painstaking millimeter. The latch slipped back. He nudged the door just enough to create a narrow slit, no wider than 2 fingers, just enough to peer inside. A gust of air escaped the crack, smacking Zane's face like exhaust from a running engine. It wasn't only hot, it was suffocating thick with the stench of burning plastic and the unmistakable sharp tang of sickness. Zane pressed his eye to the tiny gap. The room was swallowed in shadows. Heavy blackout curtains, normally for nap time, were pulled tight, cutting out the bright spring sunlight. The only illumination came from the soft orange glow of heating coils in the corner, and the cold, clinical flood of light from the open bathroom door leading to the nursery. Then he saw him. Jace! The sight struck Zane with the force of a brutal blow. His son moved with a frantic, terrified urgency no child of 5 should ever have. Jace wore a stained gray tank top hanging loose on his fragile frame like a tent. His collarbones jutted sharply beneath his thin skin, and his arms looked fragile as dry twigs. Jace dashed into the ensuite bathroom. Zane caught the splash of water. Moments later, the boy re-emerged, bare feet barely touching the carpet as he clutched a dripping washcloth tightly with both hands. He rushed back to the crib. Zane shifted his angle to get a clear view, and his heart shattered. Lily lay motionless on her back, limbs sprawled in the unnatural, exhausted stillness of heat stroke. She didn't cry. She didn't move. Her skin was an angry, raw red, flushed with a dangerous fire that radiated from her even at a distance. Her tiny chest heaved with quick, shallow breaths. "Please, Lily," Jace whispered, voice breaking. He reached on tiptoes, stretching over the railing to press the damp cloth gently against his sister's fevered forehead. "Wake up! Please don't fall asleep." The cloth's water dripped slowly, soaking through the collar of Lily's sleep sack. But she didn't stir. She didn't even flinch. Jasisi pulled the cloth away, his hands trembling so fiercely he nearly lost his grip. He brushed her cheek with a shaky hand, then stared at it as if it had betrayed him. He wiped tears from his face on his shoulder, leaving a streak of wetness behind, and bolted back toward the bathroom. Splash ring run an endless cycle. It was a relentless loop, fueled by desperation, a 5-year-old boy battling the unforgiving laws of nature to save his sister. Zane felt a hot, angry tear roll down his cheek. He wanted to smash the door down to grab them both and run, but he was powerless. Not yet. He had to find the threat. He needed to know where she was. His gaze swept the shadows of the room, and there she stood. Mara leaned casually against the far wall near the changing table, draped in shadow between the bathroom's pale light and the soft glow of the heater. She looked bored, almost indifferent. One hand scrolled through her phone, her body relaxed, hip cocked with ease. In her other hand, she held a digital ear thermometer. Lifting her eyes from the screen, she locked onto Jace as he hurried back from the bathroom, cloth in hand. She didn't offer to help. She didn't check on the baby. She just watched him coldly like a scientist observing a desperate rat in a maze. "Check her again," Mara ordered, her voice flat, with no trace of motherly warmth. Jace hesitated, then hurried to the crib. Instead of the cloth, he grabbed the thermometer Mara had left on the table. His small fingers fumbled to press the button before carefully placing it in Lily's ear. Beep! Jace pulled it out, eyes wide and terrified as he stared at the number. He looked to Mara, his gaze pools of raw fear. "What does it say?" Mara asked, glancing at her wristwatch. 40. Jace stammered. He wasn't sure about the decimals. 40 degrees. Mara pushed away from the wall and strode over, snatching the device from Jace's trembling grasp with sharp, decisive motion. She held it up to the bathroom light. 40 Celsius, she muttered. That's 104 Fahrenheit. Zane studied her face, waiting for the panic. Searching for the mother, he thought she was a flicker of alarm for how far this had spiraled. But Mara just smiled. A small, tight smile, heavy with cruel satisfaction. She tapped the thermometer against her palm. Good, she whispered, but in that heavy silence it sounded like a scream. It's high, but not high enough for seizures, not yet. She glanced at her watch again, tapping the glass with a manicured nail. 10 more minutes, she murmured, more to herself than to Jace. If she stays at 104 for 10 minutes more, the protein structures in her brain begin to break down, causing permanent cognitive damage. The doctors will call it a tragic, fever-induced injury. She looked down at Jace, who shook uncontrollably, knees knocking together. He hugged himself, caught between Mara's cold stare and his sister fading away. 10 minutes, Jace, Mara hissed, jabbing a finger at him. Keep her wet enough so she doesn't die, but do not let her temperature drop below 40 until I say so. You know what that means. Jace nodded, desperately frantic. Tears poured down his face, no longer holding back. I won't let her cool off, I swear it. Just don't harm her. I'm not the one causing her pain, Mara said softly, sweeping her hair back with a chilling calmness. It's nature that's hurting her. We're only letting nature do what it must. Think about the insurance money, Jace. Imagine how much better life will be when we have the funds to care for a child with special needs. Daddy won't have to work so hard. Don't you want Daddy at home? I want Daddy. Jace sobbed. The sound broke Zane's heart, tearing at his resolve. I want Daddy to come home. Daddy's not coming back, Mara hissed. Daddy's out chasing bad guys miles away. It's just us now, and you will do exactly as I say. She turned to the window again, peering through a crack in the curtains, as if waiting for a delivery. Totally unaware, she was watching the slow destruction of a child. Zane had reached his limit. He'd heard enough. The officer and he collected the evidence: child endangerment, severe abuse, and attempted murder. The father inside him wanted to tear the world apart. He stepped back from the doorframe, his face hard as stone. His gaze fell on Rollo. The dog looked up, aware of the change in Zane's energy. The moment for stealth had passed. The hunter was about to enter the trap. Zane's hand slid from the doorknob down to the holster at his side, not to draw his weapon, but to steady himself. He drew a deep breath, filling his lungs with the cooler air of the hallway, readying himself to unleash the storm inside. Zane didn't kick the door down. That was the rookie cop's temptation, to announce his arrival with a crash of force. But the seasoned sergeant, a survivor of armored standoffs and mountain manhunts, knew chaos would ruin control. He gently pushed the door. It opened silently on the smooth, well-oiled hinges, the gap widening from a slit to a yawning space. Zane stepped through, his boots sinking softly into the plush nursery carpet. He didn't stomp. Instead, he rolled his weight from heel to toe, silencing his steps, becoming a shadow in what should have been his sanctuary. Rollo moved close beside him, a dark extension of Zane's determination. The dog didn't pant. He held back his claws from tapping. Moving with a deadly grace, his head, low amber eyes fixed on the woman by the window. The room's only sound was the harsh, unyielding hum of the space heater, churning hot, stale air like a relentless oven. The heat hit Zane instantly. It formed a physical wall, thick with the scent of damp wool, overheated electronics, and the sharp tang of desperate sweat. It clung to his skin, pulling his shirt tight across his back, but the fierce, cold rage burning deep inside kept his body trembling. Jace was the first to notice. The boy was halfway to the bathroom, gripping a dripping washcloth, when he felt movement at the door. He spun around, bare feet, tripping on the oversized hem of his dirty shirt. Zane braced himself, softening his face, readying his arms to hold his son. He expected a cry of relief. He expected Jace to drop the cloth and rush into his arms, sobbing, "Daddy, Daddy, you came!" But Jace didn't move toward him. The boy's eyes locked onto Zane's dark silhouette in the doorway, his pupils widening until they became black voids filled with terror. His face drained of color so fast it looked like the very blood had vanished into thin air. He didn't see a father. He didn't see a hero. To him, Zane was the boogeyman. Jace let out a strangled, high-pitched gasp, dropping the washcloth. It fell with a soft, wet plop onto the floor. Then with a frantic, jittery movement like a trapped animal, Jace scrambled backward. He didn't flee to a corner or hide under the bed. Instead, he threw himself resolutely in front of the crib, standing with arms outstretched like a lone shield between Zane and Lily. His frail arms reached out as wide as possible, trembling violently. His chin quivered, tears brimmed and spilled down his cheeks, yet he never looked away. He fixed his gaze steadily on Zane, chest rising and falling. Jace's voice cracked into a fragile squeak. "I was trying. I was just cooling her off, I swear. Please don't hurt her. Dad, please don't hurt her." Those words hit Zane like a shotgun blast to the chest. "Don't hurt her." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Zane's hand, hovering near his belt, dropped limply to his side, paralyzed. He looked down at his son, his gentle, fragile boy, and saw nothing but raw, unfiltered terror locked in his eyes. Jace wasn't shielding Lily from Mara. He was defending her from Zane himself. In that heartbeat, the full weight of manipulation became crystal clear. This wasn't just neglect. It wasn't mere abuse. It was psychological warfare. Mara hadn't only inflicted harm. She had weaponized the very image of Zane against them. She had twisted the father into an executioner in his children's eyes. A shard of Zane's soul, shriveled, dying inside him, replaced quickly by a chilling resolve that even frightened him. Mara, still facing the window, had yet to notice Zane's presence. She'd only heard Jace's gasp and the soft thud of the cloth hitting the floor. "Pick it up, Jace," she barked without turning around, her tone dismissive and sharp. "I told you no breaks. If you quit, the temperature drops and we have to start all over again. Do you want to be stuck here all night?" Jace didn't move. His eyes remained locked on Zane as he whimpered quietly, his fragile body standing as a thin shield for his unconscious sister. "I said pick it up!" Mara's patience snapped like a frayed wire. She pushed off the wall, spinning around with a scowl, ready to scold the boy. "What is wrong with you? Are you deaf?" The word caught in her throat. She froze. The transformation came instantly. Gone was the arrogance, the boredom, the cruel dominance. All vanished, replaced by a raw shock that seemed to hurt. Her mouth dropped open, silent. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Zane stood just inside the doorway, casting a shadow that swallowed the light from the hallway. He was a towering figure, cloaked in darkness. Not in uniform yet. Never had he looked more like a lawman than he did at that moment. His face was a granite mask, devoid of any emotion Mara could twist. No love, no confusion, no pain, only unwavering judgment. Rollo stood beside him, silent and formidable, lips curled back, just enough to bare his white, sharp teeth. He didn't bark, merely stared at Mara, muscles tensed, waiting for a single wrong move. The silence that followed was suffocating. The hum of the heater grew painfully loud, screaming in the heavy stillness between them. Mara's hand clutching the thermometer started trembling. First a gentle shake, then a violent spasm. She stumbled backward, colliding with the changing table, her face drained from flushed to ghostly pale. "Zane," she whispered, the name falling out as a question. It was as if she couldn't fathom his reality, as if she were staring at a ghost haunting her past. "You're in California," she whispered, disbelief etched across her face. "You're supposed to be in California." Zane's eyes never wavered. No outburst broke his calm. No desperate charge to reach her. Instead, he let the sheer weight of his presence squeeze the breath from the room. He revealed Rollo at his side. He revealed the gun resting against his hip. He let her witness the son she had tormented standing firm, shielding the daughter she aimed to destroy. One deliberate step forward followed. Mara recoiled, flinching as if he'd raised a fist. She scrambled sideways, placing the space heater like a fragile barrier between them, gripping the thermometer tightly, her lifeline in a storm. "It's not true Jace is sick," she stammered, her voice rising, cracking on the edge of hysteria. Lies spilled effortlessly, a desperate instinct beyond her control. I was just checking the heater. It's broken. I was trying to turn it off, but the knob's stuck. Zane raised his hand slowly, a small, measured motion. He didn't accuse her face directly, only pointed a steady finger at the thermometer, trembling in her grasp. 40 degrees, Zane said softly, his voice ghostly and cold. His words resonated deep in his chest, cleaving through the persistent hum of the heater like a sharpened blade. This wasn't a husband accusing a deceitful wife. This was a harbinger delivering a grim verdict. Mara's chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. What she whispered. You checked the temperature and you did the math. Zane pressed eyes burning into hers. Another step closer, the stifling heat in the room, suffocating sweat trickling down his temple, yet inside he felt nothing but ice. You weren't trying to heal them, Zane declared. Each word a heavy stone dragged across the floor. You were slowly cooking them alive. No, baby, just listen, Mara cried, pulling on the mask of innocence she used to escape speeding tickets. You're twisting this. I love them. Jace is confused, he's lying. 40 degrees. Zane interrupted sharply, stepping even closer, looming over the heater, ignoring the blast of scalding air at his legs. That's the line where brain damage begins. You said it yourself, you're counting down the minutes. His eyes flicked to Jace, still trembling, still shielding lily eyes wide with a terror that shattered Zane's heart. But forcing himself to look back at Mara, he funneled every ounce of his anguish into raging fury. Are you waiting for my child's mind to shut down completely? The question hammered silently, brutal and unyielding. Mara's back hit the wall. She was trapped with no escape. Her carefully crafted facade fell apart, shattered irreparably on the floor. She glanced at Rollo, inching forward a low growl, rumbling like the shifting of earth beneath them. Zane, please, she whimpered, tears welling freely now, real tears of fear. The dog, call him off. He's the only reason you're still breathing. Zane spoke softly, but there was steel beneath the calm. But he's losing patience, so am I. The digital thermometer didn't just drop. It slipped from Mara's slick, shaking fingers, as if gravity had suddenly grown tenfold. It landed on the carpet with a dull thud, the battery cover popping free, the small plastic screen splitting down the center. That subtle sound, meaningless anywhere else, marked the start of everything. In the split second before Mara could gasp, Rollo surged forward. Not running, he exploded from his stillness, a furious, fierce streak of black and tan energy. A whirlwind of raw power, muscle, and teeth fused into one relentless missile. In one fluid leap, Rollo closed the gap between the doorframe and the room's far corner, soaring through the air before Mara's mind could even catch up to the threat. No! She screamed, arms flailing wildly to shield her face. She crumpled with no way out. The sheer impact of Rollo's arrival, the explosive rush of air from his snap, shoved her backward. She tumbled into the room's corner, where the walls met Jean sliding harshly against the baseboards, her legs entangling beneath her like tangled vines. Rollo landed heavily on his front paws, squeezing in between her spread legs. He didn't attack her. Discipline held him back. Instead, his jaws snapped shut mere inches from her throat. The hollow, terrifying clack of teeth clashing, echoing like the crack of a gun. Then a roar burst forth, deep, fierce, shaking the window pane behind Mara like a thunderclap. It was an ancient call, bypassing logic, striking straight to the primal brain. Stay down. Mara curled up tightly, sobbing uncontrollably, burying her face into her knees. Each time she twitched, Rollo growled low, a rolling thunder rumble right beside her ear. He was the guardian at that moment. Zane didn't take his eyes off them. Trust in his dog was absolute. The instant Rollo moved, Zane was already acting, but his real target was the crib. His hand reached the heater first. With a brutal tug, he yanked the cord from the outlet. The plug sparked briefly, and the mechanical drone died instantaneously. Silence crashed down, heavy, suffocating, thick like heat itself. Zane slipped his hands into the crib, usually steady with a firearm. His fingers trembled at the touch of his daughter. Lily was burning up. It felt wrong, unnaturally wrong, like touching a red-hot stove. Her skin was dry, dangerously dry. That meant her body had stopped sweating, stopped fighting the fire inside. She was limp, a rag doll wrapped in a pink sleep sack. "I've got you, baby girl." "Daddy's right here," Zane whispered, voice cracking with raw emotion. He lifted her gently. She was lifeless against his chest. His hand grabbed the radio clipped to his shoulder, the fragile link to the world beyond this nightmare. "Dispatch Sergeant Whitmore off duty requesting immediate heavy rescue at my location." He didn't wait for a response. Code 3. Infant female, roughly 8 months old, unresponsive, severe hyperthermia core temp, elevated possible salt toxicity. Send everything you can. Copy that, Sergeant. Units en route. ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes might as well have been 4 lifetimes. Zane laid Lily down on the changing table. He had to strip her, get this heat out. His fingers fumbled with the zipper of the sleep sack. Behind him, a soft, strangled sound pierced the chaos. I'm sorry." Zane froze in place. He turned his head. Jace stood near the bathroom door, pressed so hard into the frame it seemed he was trying to disappear into the wood itself. He held himself tightly, Knuckles' white eyes never meeting the dog, or Mara only focused on Zane's belt, on the gun. "I'm sorry, Daddy." Jay sobbed, chest shaking with each painful hiccup. "I tried. I ran so fast. I put water on her, but she wouldn't cool down." "Please! Please don't shoot me!" The words landed like a thunderous punch, more brutal than any blow Zane had ever taken in the ring. Zane's gaze dropped to his hip, where the Glock 19 rested, the weapon he wielded to shield the city, now twisted into a symbol of dread against his own son thanks to Mara. Without hesitation, Zane unclipped the holster. He didn't just remove the gun, he shed the entire rig. Lowering himself to the floor, he slid the firearm far away, beneath the dresser, out of harm's reach. Jace Zane's voice wavered with emotion. Ignoring the ache in his joints, he knelt fully. He opened his arms wide, palms facing up, completely empty. "Look at me, buddy. Look at your dad." Jace flinched, clenching his eyes shut, as if bracing for a blow. "I'm not here to punish you." Zane choked out, tears breaking free. Hot, blinding streams flowing down his face. "You're not in trouble. You are the bravest kid on this earth. You saved her, Jace. You kept her alive." One tear-filled, skeptical eye peeked open. "I did," Jace wondered. "Yes," Zane murmured, inching closer on trembling knees, careful not to startle him. "You did exactly what you needed to do. You're a true hero. I'm here to stop her." He gestured with a thumb toward Mara, crouched beneath Rollo's guard. "I'm here to take all the darkness away." Jace's lip quivered. The dam within him shattered. With a sob that seemed too massive for his frail, starved chest, he lunged forward. Zane caught him without hesitation. Pressing his face deep into his son's neck, he smelled sweat and lingering fear wrapping his powerful arms tightly around the fragile bird-like frame. Jace clung desperately, his tiny fingers digging into Zane's shirt, as though it was his lifeline. "I was so scared," Jace sobbed into his dad's collar. "She said you'd never come back if I ate. She said you hated us." "Lies," Zane whispered fiercely, fingers trembling as he stroked Jace's hair. "All lies. I love you more than the world itself. I swear I'll never leave you again." He eased back just enough to scan Jace for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did she hit you?" "My hands hurt, Jace," whispered, eyes downcast. Zane cupped his son's hands gently, turning his palms up beneath the harsh bathroom light. What he saw sparked a furious blaze inside him, white-hot and blinding, ready to consume every ounce of calm. Jace's hands were shattered. The skin on his palms and fingers was stark, lifeless, white, wrinkled and battered like someone endlessly soaked. But far worse, the water had ravaged the very fibers of his flesh. Yet it was the fingertips that broke Zane's heart hardest. Those pads were raw, top layers of skin scraped away completely. Blood and clear fluid oozed freely. Suddenly, the truth hit Zane like a strike. Jace hadn't just dipped his hands he had scrubbed. He had wrung that rough towel with all his might again and again, the coarse fabric mercilessly scraping against his water-softened skin. He had plunged his hands into ice-cold water until the nerves screamed in agony. And then without pause, he did it all over again. He had literally flayed his own hands in a desperate attempt to cool his sister down. "Oh God," Zane breathed, lifting the tiny, ruined hands to his lips with reverence. He kissed the wrists gently, careful not to touch the raw, exposed skin. "My boy. My sweet, fearless boy." "It burned every time I squeezed the towel," Jace whispered, ashamed. "But I didn't stop. She told me not to stop." "You did amazing," Zane said thickly. "Absolutely amazing." Sirens started wailing in the distance, growing louder. The cavalry was closing in. Zane rose to his feet. Scooping Jace up onto his hip, Zane felt how alarmingly light he was, almost unnaturally so. He carried him back to the changing table where Lily lay quietly. Reaching into the diaper bag, he grabbed a bottle of water Mara had stashed for moments like this, pouring some onto a clean cloth, gently brushing it across Lily's damp neck and underarms. "Help has arrived," Zane reassured them softly, glancing from Lily's flushed skin to Jace's weary eyes. From the corner, Mara shifted her leg cautiously, prompting Rollo to growl a deep, wet rumble that vibrated the wooden floor beneath them. He snapped his jaws mere inches from her face. "Don't move," Zane warned coldly, never taking his eyes off the dog. "If you dare make a move, I won't hold him back." Then suddenly the sirens outside cut through the tension, replaced by the heavy stomp of boots in the driveway and the crackle of police radios. The front door floored open with force. "Police Sheriff's Department. Upstairs," Zane's voice rang out with renewed authority. "Nursery secure for entry." As booted footsteps thundered up the stairs, Zane cradled his children close. The nightmare had finally ended, but the wounds, the marks etched into Jace's hands, and the deep cuts hidden inside his mind were just beginning to bleed anew. Outside, red and blue flashing lights carved shards through Denver's dusk. The harsh shift from the suffocating nursery heat to the cool evening breeze was jolting a harsh shock, crashing over him. "Clear the way, please. We need open access." Officer Mike Miller, a 2-decade veteran with a salt and pepper mustache and a rotund frame shaped by countless patrol rides, took command of the chaotic scene. He looked at Zane not as a sergeant, but as a broken father on the verge of collapse. Miller gave no salute, only a firm, steady hand pressed on Zane's shoulder for a brief moment. "We've got her," Sergeant Miller declared grimly. "Go be with your kids, we're handling her." Zane didn't glance back as 2 officers dragged Mara out through the front door. She was no longer fighting back limp and catatonic, with eyes wide open yet vacant, her hands cuffed behind her. Rollo, now restrained by a K-9 officer, unleashed one last booming bark as she passed by, a final epic echo to the violence of the ordeal. The ambulance ride was a chaotic symphony of buzzing beeps, radio static, and the rustle of medical nylon bags. Zane sat squeezed between stretchers on the bench seat. To his left, paramedics worked urgently on Lily, threading IV lines into her tiny, dehydrated veins. To his right, Jace sat upright on his gurney, refusing to lie down, eyes fixed unwaveringly on his sister. Heart rate's 180, temperature's down to 102, but she's seizing a young paramedic named Sarah, called out to the driver. "Step on it." Zane reached out, took Jace's trembling hand, and the boy flinched before slowly curling his fingers around Zane's thumb. His grip was fragile, quivering. "Is she going to die?" Jace whispered, voice barely audible over the siren's wail. "No," Zane said, forcing a strength into his voice he didn't truly feel. "The doctors are going to save her just like you started to." At Denver General, they were separated immediately. A flood of yellow-gowned trauma staff swarmed Lily's stretcher, rushing her into Bay 1 with a storm of urgent commands. Zane tried to follow, but a nurse gently guided him toward Bay 3, where Jace was being taken. "I can't leave her," Zane protested, glancing back desperately. "She's in the best hands, Dad," the nurse said firmly. "Right now, your son needs you. Look at him." Glancing back, the nurse's voice held steady. "She's in the safest hands, Dad, but your son needs you more than ever. Look at him." Zane's gaze fell upon Jace, who sat perched on the edge of the towering hospital bed, looking small, fragile, and utterly lost within the cold, sterile white room. Fear was etched deep into Jace's face, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar strangers around him. Swallowing the tight lump forming in his throat, Zane gave a slow nod, then moved closer to his son. At that moment, Dr. Eris Thorne, the attending pediatrician, entered the room. Tall and composed glasses balanced delicately on the bridge of his long nose, Dr. Thorne exuded a calm efficiency. He swiftly began assessing Jace, observing his pupil response, listening intently to his heartbeat, and gently pressing on his abdomen. Grade 3 malnutrition, Dr. Thorne murmured to the nurse nearby, his voice low but clear enough for Zane to catch. Severe muscle wasting, moderate dehydration. And look closely at these hands. Carefully, he lifted Jace's marred, bleeding fingers. Soaking injury? Chemical or thermal cold water exposure? Zane rasped from the bedside, remembering how Jace had tried to cool his sister all day, wringing soaked towels tirelessly for hours. Dr. Thorne's eyes met Zane's respect, flashing like a quiet flame on his face. "A brave kid," he said softly. "We'll dress and wrap these wounds right away." Suddenly, the curtain to the bay whipped open abruptly. A resident doctor's pale face appeared. "Dr. Thorne, the lab results for the infant in Bay 1 are in. You have to see this." Dr. Thorne excused himself without hesitation and stepped outside. Zane stayed close to Jace, gently stroking his tangled, matted hair. Through the thin curtain, the doctors' voices drifted over heavy with urgency. "Sodium levels are critical," the resident doctor stated gravely. 190. "That's beyond dehydration. This is hypernatremia." Salt poisoning. Dr. Thorne snapped sharply, anger cutting through his tone. "Someone's been deliberately feeding that baby fluids loaded with salt. It pulls water right from the brain cells," Thorne explained grimly. "Causes the brain to shrink, tearing it away from the skull. That's why the seizures." Zane's knees weakened beneath him, the weight of the truth crushing. Salt. Mara hadn't just neglected them. She hadn't simply let the room overheat. She'd deliberately poisoned Lily's milk, a cold, calculated act of chemical cruelty. In Bay 3, a nurse named Becky, her scrubs bright with cheerful cartoons, offered a gentle smile to Jace. "All right, sweetheart," she said softly. "We need to get these soiled clothes off and dress you in something warm. We have to check your tummy, okay?" Jace shook his head fiercely, clutching the worn hem of his oversized, filthy gray shirt with desperate strength. No, don't take it off," he pleaded. "It's okay, Jace," Zane said, stepping closer, voice tender and steady. "It's just a quick checkup. Daddy's right here with you." Jace looked up at Zane, eyes full of silent begging, then slowly released his grip on the shirt. Becky carefully lifted the fabric over Jace's head. The shirt came off, and a heavy silence fell over the room. Becky gasped, hand flying to cover her mouth. Dr. Thorne, just returning, froze mid-step. Zane felt all the air rush out of him like a brutal blow to his chest. Jace's back was a landscape of unbearable pain, not just the stark outline of ribs jutting out like the hull of a starving vessel, but the skin itself told a brutal story, crisscrossed with scars, some old and silvery, others fresh and pink, a few still raw and scabbing over. Thin, long welts encircled his sides like cruel bands. Circular burns hinted at the cruel touch of a cigarette lighter's flame. Near his shoulder blades, there were rhythmic bruises, purple and yellow bruises, the repeated imprint of relentless, blunt force trauma. "Jesus Christ," Dr. Thorne whispered in disbelief. Zane stared, tracing the lines of pain with his eyes, struggling to breathe. "I bathed him, I dressed him. How could he have missed this torment?" His eyes followed the lines, breath caught in his chest. He had bathed Jace. He had dressed him. How had this all slipped past his notice? "Because you were never there!" a voice screamed deep inside his mind. "Because she was the one who bathed him when you were home. Because she dressed him in long sleeves and told you he got cold easily. Because you believed her, Jace." Zane's voice cracked like shattered glass. "Who did this to you?" Jace stayed silent. He curled his shoulders inward, trying to hide his wounded back, wishing he could vanish into the shadows. "I need a consult," Dr. Thorne said to the nurse, his voice taut with controlled anger. "Call Dr. Rosales down here right away." 10 minutes later, Dr. Elena Rosales came in. She was small, with warm brown skin and eyes that radiated endless patience. No white coat adorned her, just a soft cardigan. She perched gently on a rolling stool so she was lower than Jace, meeting his gaze with quiet respect rather than looking down on him. She didn't ask about the burns or the salt. She simply introduced herself and asked Jace if he liked the blue jello the nurse brought him. Jace nodded, taking a gentle spoonful, his eyes flickering toward Zane every few moments, silently seeking approval. "Jace," Dr. Rosales said softly, "your dad tells me you're a superhero, that you saved your sister today." Jace stared down at his bandaged hands. "I tried." "You did more than try," Rosales said. "But even superheroes need to call for backup sometimes. When the bad guys get too strong, Batman calls on Gordon, right?" Jace nodded again. "I want to understand something, Jace." Rosales continued, her voice a soothing, steady rhythm that felt safe. "You knew Lily was sick. You knew she was hurting. And you knew your dad had a phone and a radio." She paused, waiting for Jace to meet her eyes. "Why didn't you call him, or run outside to tell a neighbor?" The silence in the room stretched heavy. The heart monitor's beep slowed, like a fading heartbeat. Jace looked to Zane. The terror was back in his eyes, that raw, primal fear Zane had witnessed in the nursery. "I couldn't," Jace whispered. "Why not, buddy?" Zane asked, stepping closer, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I would have come. I would have flown home. Why didn't you tell me?" Jace began trembling, pulling his knees tight against his chest. "Because you're a policeman," he said. Zane frowned, puzzled. "Yes, I am. That means I help people." Jace shook his head. "No, Mom. Mara told me that policemen have to punish bad kids. She said that's your job." Jace looked at Dr. Rosales, then back at his father, his voice dropping to a fearful whisper as he confessed the nightmare that silenced him for 2 years. She said, "You carry a gun," Jace said, voice shaking, "and a big black stick." "The baton," Zane said, feeling blood drain from his face. "She said if I ever told anyone, if I snitched on her, she would tell you I was the one who hurt Lily." Jace's words rushed out, tears now flowing freely. "She said she'd say I hit Lily, and because you're a cop, you'd have to believe the grown-up. You'd take your stick and your gun and you'd do your job on me." Jace looked down at his bandaged hands, shame flooding every inch of his face. "I didn't want you to shoot us. Daddy, I didn't want you to beat me with the baton, so I promised I wouldn't tell. I promised I'd just be good." The confession hung heavy in the sterile room, sharp like a guillotine blade. It wasn't just fear of abuse, it was fear of him. Mara had warped the very emblems of Zane's honor, his badge, his service pistol, his baton, transforming them into the monsters lurking beneath Jace's bed. She had led a 5-year-old boy to believe his father's love was a fragile bond tied to his silence, turning his father's calling into a menace rather than a protector. Zane gazed upon his son, this shattered, famished, wounded child who had suffered unimaginable torment to shield his sister from the father he feared would destroy them. The resilience that had carried Zane through the breach, the arrest, and the ambulance ride now slipped away like smoke. "Oh God." Zane stammered, his legs faltering beneath him. He did not fall with grace, he collapsed utterly. His knees slammed against the hospital linoleum, the impact resonating through the stillness of the room. He buried his face in his hands, claws tangled in his hair, unleashing a sound that hovered between a sob and a scream. It was the